Welcome to the first episode of the third series of the Tessa Talks To Podcast, where I'll be exploring what music means to musical couples. My first guests are Helen Grime and Huw Watkins, both hugely celebrated and successful composers, and I'm delighted to be with them today. Recent works of Helen include Woven Space, which was commissioned by the Barbican for Sir Simon Rattle's inaugural season as music director of the London Symphony Orchestra, and a percussion concerto for Colin Cowie, which was given premiere performances in January 2019 by the London Philharmonic Orchestra. Huw is one of the UK's finest pianists, having premiered works by Oliver Nussin, Mark Anthony Turnage, and performed concertos with numerous leading orchestras, including the BBC Symphony Orchestra and the London Sinfonietta. And most recently, at this season of the Proms in 2019, the BBC National Orchestra of Wales premiered Huw's piece, The Moon, for chorus and orchestra. Welcome, Huw and Helen. Thank you for being with me today. So where did you first meet?
We met at the Royal College of Music in London, and I was studying, and Huw was a junior fellow, which is sort of halfway between that and not studying. And we'd actually almost met a few times before that. We were supposed to be both writing miniature operas for Tête opera, and I did that, and you ended up not doing that. There was a few sort of almost meetings.
That's right, but I think the first time I got to know Helen was, well, one of the things I had to do as a junior fellow was work with the student composers and organise performances of their music. And there was a piece of Helen's that just was so impressive. It was way above the standard of anybody else's. It was brilliant. And I'm not just saying that because I ended up getting married to her. I mean, it really was brilliant. And so since then, I think I played a couple of other pieces of yours in the college. There was a beautiful song that you wrote with words by Andrew Motion.
Was that your first piece, the baritone and piano?
Oh no, that was much before. That was, I think I was 12 then, but there was a song.
12? You wrote your first piece at 12?
Probably 11 or 12.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and Huw was much younger than that.
Really? How old were you?
I can't remember exactly, sort of 8 or 9 or something like that, but those things, actually I've seen
They don't really count.
They don't really count.
Musical beginnings.
They're very cute, but I wouldn't want to get them out in public.
Your 6-year-old son Sam is very musical.
Well, he, I think, started composing before he really could play anything on the piano, and he doesn't really know what it's going to sound like, although he's starting to think about that more now, but just because he sees us composing, he's always seen us composing, so that seems like a normal thing to do.
He's surrounded by music, isn't he? He's surrounded by music and seeing you work and the process, and a couple of weeks ago he was such a special thing to be able to do. He came to the Proms rehearsal to hear your premiere.
That's right. Yes, he did, and I mean he was. There was also a piece by Takemitsu beforehand, and it was wonderful just to see him watching an orchestra live for the first time, I suppose.
It was the first
Pretty
time.
much, and in the Albert Hall as well, which is such a
prestigious,
overwhelming space if you haven't been inside it. And he sat up for this quite sophisticated piece of Takemitsu's.
How do you both come to start a new piece that you've either been commissioned or an idea that you've had? Do you discuss it together? Do you inspire each other? What's your sort of initial process?
I think the starting off of a new piece is, well, for me, and I think for Helen too, probably quite a private thing. So I don't like to talk about it so much until well into the process.
Even to Helen?
Yeah,
oh, wow.
Although it is wonderful secretive. To have some. I'm quite secretive. But it is, once the piece is up and running, I definitely like to know, what she thinks.
He actually doesn't show me anything till it's finished, really.
Oh, really?
Whereas I very much appreciate getting some feedback sort of during the process when I've written something. What do you think of the pacing of this? Does this come through strongly? Is this clear enough? That kind of thing. I very much like that back and forth, which I'm not sure that Huw always enjoys so much, because when you're trying to write your own music, it can be confusing or a little annoying to have someone else's piece. It's sort of like, it's hard enough to write my own piece. I don't want to hear what you're doing. So there's a bit of that, but you know, it's great to know that the other person shares some of the same sort of challenges.
And the support and the understanding, the empathy,
Yeah.
I guess that's key.
And very much the understanding of the sort of general frustrations of it, you know, because sometimes you know what you want to do, but the process of actually getting there is a long one, and a frustrating one. So
and the
we sort of
time
get
that you need, that's really important to understand how much time and maybe space in some cases you need independently.
One of the nicest things actually about having a little boy now is we have to stop. The thing about composing is it's a very obsessive thing, and you could just go on all evening and all night.
And you feel that you should.
And
It's infinite.
You do feel a sort of guilt about it. I mean, we've both chosen it, and we're very lucky. We realise to be able to do it and to make some kind of living out of it. But it is an obsession, and so it's really nice to say, well, this is the end of our working day now. 'Cause we work
And
from
on the
home,
weekends, yeah.
Exactly, and on the weekends we have proper weekends with Sam, and that's a quite healthy way to inject a bit of normality into our lifestyles.
And what do you do? What do you enjoy doing to relax and refresh?
Well, I mean, it depends if we're with Sammy or not, doesn't it, really? But good food and cooking, definitely important for me. And we like to just sort of get out and have...
Yeah, living in London, there's so many things, particularly with a child, that you can explore. It's like seeing them for the first time. So, we take lots of trips, I suppose.
Yeah, that, and just family time as well, you know, getting to Wales to see your parents and all of those sorts of things.
And do you find inspiration sometimes in the journeys? Because travelling can be really inspiring.
I think just actually having that time off. I mean, I think when you're composing, you feel like if I could only keep going and I could just, you know, I had 2 days without any other things to do, I could just like really get into this and get this bit done. But sometimes when you do actually forcibly take those days off, just because there's no other option, sometimes things fall into place a little bit easier, and something that might not have come to if you've just been banging your head off that wall and sitting there for 8 hours do come in a more spontaneous way. And you do need that time, I think. The subconscious, not
just
actually
to allow,
consciously sort of forcing it.
Yeah. And you are, like you said, very lucky to be earning a living composing. It's something which a lot of people aspire to. Did that happen organically, or was there a moment in your careers separately that you realised that actually you really could make this happen?
I mean, I think we both still do supplement our incomes with other things. I mean, I play the piano, and Helen teaches. For me, the piano playing and the composing are completely intertwined, and I wouldn't and couldn't do one without the other, I suppose. And actually, also playing the piano has been my route to a lot of commissions and a lot of pieces that I've written, because you play with wonderful musicians, and very often if they're interested in curious people, they want to play your music and even commission new things. So it's all part of the same thing for me.
For example, with Adam Walker, you were playing with him as an accompanist or playing as a
That's
pianist,
right.
And then he explored further.
Absolutely. Well, Adam Walker is the absolutely sensational principal flautist of the London Symphony Orchestra. And it was a music festival in Wales, the Grime Festival, that asked me if I'd write a piece for him, just a piece for piano and flute. And I said, yeah, as long as I can play with him too. And because I knew how brilliant he was. And that immediately led to Adam saying, I'd like a concerto as well.
Wow, so you
that
must
was
have
very
really
nice.
loved it.
Yeah, we have really hit it off.
So relationships can sometimes lead to new commissions, as with Colin Cowie. Is that how did that come about, your percussion concerto for Colin Cowie?
Well, with Colin, that's been sort of a long time in the making, but also just we've known each other for a very long time. I mean, I've known of Colin since I was at school. We're both from Edinburgh. We didn't go to the same school, but we were in the National Youth Orchestra of Scotland at different times, and so he was like that bit older than me, and sort of like, ooh, Colin Cowie.
The cool gang.
Yeah, and he was just like, like this glamorous soloist and all of that sort of thing. And then you knew Colin before me, really, even though we were both Scottish, because similar group of friends in common, all of that sort of thing, and you're the same age as Colin. And we ended up moving to Hither Green because of Colin Cowie. So, yeah, we were living somewhere else and looking for a house, and yeah, we thought, what's this area? And ended up coming here.
It's a magnet of artists.
Exactly.
It's true, there are so many musicians who live in this part of the last sort of affordable part of London. But I think, yeah, we've both written pieces for Colin now, and because he's a percussionist, the repertoire is much smaller than for more violin or piano or something like that. So his whole career has been...
He's done so much for commissioning and expanding the repertoire.
And he's such a virtuosic performer, and your music, I've heard some of your bits of the concerto for Colin, and it's so varied in colour and orchestration with this amazing amount of instruments that you managed to... And you made it into a concerto for percussion rather than a sort of virtuosic display of percussion with the orchestra. It felt really like a solo commission.
Yeah, I think knowing him as a person for so long, as well as knowing the artist, is really important. Deciding the sort of piece that I wanted to write, and I think probably for you as well, writing your duo, the same sort of thing. So I knew what I didn't want to do, partly because I'd heard other pieces that had been written for him. And I knew what I really wanted to sort of focus in on, what he could do really, really well. And he has an amazing sort of magnetism as a performer. And he also has like varied tastes and plays a wide range of repertoire as well. And I find that really inspiring. So yeah, that it's kind of a special thing writing for someone that you do know that well, because it's
a different layer of another dimension, more character,
and it's kind of daunting as well, because I know some of the things that he particularly likes, and you want to write a piece that they're going to enjoy playing and that is going to mean something to them as well. You don't want to write something which they're just going to be really disappointed by. I mean, that's kind of like the same thing when you're writing a piece for anyone. You don't want them to be disappointed, but it adds an extra layer when someone's a personal friend as well, I think.
And you bring in their character, but also how much of your own character do you either consciously or unconsciously feel that you pour into your works? How would you maybe answer for each other?
Well, I think Helen's got a hugely distinctive, beautiful, personal voice, which I suppose it's difficult with any composer. I mean, we both know a lot of composers, to connect the sort of music they write with the sort of person they are. And I think it would be a very dangerous thing for our marriage if I started trying to unpick that. But I mean, I was lucky enough to have played lots of Helen's pieces, and I suppose the biggest thing that you've written for me has been a piano concerto, which
a small one,
a small piano concerto for the Birmingham Contemporary Music Group, which we did with Oliver Nussin. It's a wonderful honour and privilege to work with him. But
he's a good friend of both of you.
He was.
Inspiration.
And very lucky that sort of happened about a year before he died, really, wasn't it? Very lucky that we got the chance to work on that all together. I think it was the first project that we've done. You'd worked a lot with Ollie separately, and I'd worked with him, but together. So it was really special.
And how is that working together in terms of your ideas, your collaboration, your sort of compromises potentially that you have to make as musicians, but then also as husband and wife?
So I remember obviously getting the piano part of this piece, thinking it was absolutely wonderful, and learning it and spending a lot of time doing that, and then going and rehearsing it with Ollie conducting and Ollie loving it too. But for you, I think, for any composer, the first experience of hearing your piece can be quite a traumatic one.
It's a difficult
It takes a while
thing.
Yeah,
because when you're writing a piece, you have have an idea of what it sounds like, and the notes are the same, certainly, but once you get into the zone of hearing it rehearsed and being surrounded by other people and basically laying it out there for other people to hear, you start sort of seeing it through their eyes almost.
A bit of distance, a bit of sort of...
Yeah, and it's sort of like, well, what would I think if I was there? And, would I be bored? Or there's so many different emotions, and then it does sound different. You know, things come up across differently, different interpretations, all of that sort of thing. And so you've got this sort of idea of what you thought it was going to be, and then this other thing which doesn't quite match up with that, and then you have to sort of accept the piece
but
in various ways.
Because when I came to the opening of Simon Rattle's season with your Woven Space, and that was a work that they introduced as a work in progress, almost something that you were going to develop. And would you also have developed that Woven Space itself after listening to it and after it being performed, or is that kind of now performed and set, and then your development is the second section, so to speak?
I think so. I mean, I could have made lots of changes to the first bit, and I probably did make some small changes, but I think
it was so picturesque and so much imagery to it, and melodious, and that distinctive voice, I thought, just was overwhelming. It was
I mean, I think there's a funny thing with making changes. I think if with that piece, I knew that was going to be part of a whole, so I was thinking about how that would then lead on to the other music rather than changing that. I mean, obviously if there had been like major problems with it, I would have sorted that out, and I did tweak little things, but that thing of personal voice, I mean, I think we're both so used to each other's music that we would be able to always pick out, like, I mean, I couldn't hear Hugh's music and not know it was by Hugh, and I would never mistake someone else's music for his. And what is it, do you think, that makes Hugh's music so distinctive to Hugh? I mean, the list would be huge, you know. I mean,
in 3 words, because it's so melodious. I was so struck by the beauty of the timbre and again, it's the imagery that it projects. The music portrays, perhaps is a better word.
Yeah, I think for me it's partly to do with the sort of energy and drive, which even in the slow music there's a very strong line that goes through it, and there's a real clarity there, and a clarity of form, which is something that I really admire. Yes, and in the orchestration and also in the harmony, and I think that's a lot more than 3 words, but we could go on about stop there.
No, it's very hard. I mean, the thing is, that's a real on-the-spot question. It's hard to describe anybody's music, I think, but particularly your own. It's a tricky question it's something intangible about harmony. Melody,
it can be like the spacing of a chord. I mean, I think the way that we would both space a chord is really quite different, actually. But I would recognise yours, and I think you probably recognise what I would do. There's certain things it's the things that they wouldn't do that you notice, and that makes it really distinct.
That's true,
I think.
as well, But
perhaps an artist could articulate more your thoughts, because you're really inspired by art. And you've written, which Hugh and Hugh's brother Paul Watkins played on the piano trio. The Whistler Miniatures.
That's right.
Which we could maybe have a listen to now.
That was the third movement from my 3 Whistler miniatures. That's a piece that I wrote for an American group called the Claremont Trio. And Huw played with his brother Paul and a violinist called Ura Lee. So, yeah, that's one of the things that we've sort of worked on together recently. But I'm often very inspired by other art forms, so art. Mm-hmm. So many of my pieces recently have been inspired by the visual arts, but also poetry and novels as well. Actually, what my most recent orchestral piece that was just premiered this summer was inspired by a book called The Ice Palace by a writer called Vasas. Now, I don't know if I'm quite saying that right. It's Vesaas, an amazing Norwegian writer. It's just an absolutely wonderful modernist work that just recently been in translation in English. And it just knocked me sideways reading this. It's incredible.
The language or the story or the...
Everything about it. I mean, there's so much that's unsaid, but it's unbelievably atmospheric and powerful emotionally as well. Really recommend that. It's very mysterious. So that was something I really just felt that I wanted to respond to. And I'm sort of always I'm constantly looking for books or artworks which might, be useful for me in other pieces or come into play. I feel that I need sometimes at the beginning of the process when I'm writing. Later on, the notes take over, but at the beginning, having something to be connected to can be a very useful thing.
Fascinating. Huw, what about you? Where does your inspiration come from?
Not so directly from other art, I suppose. I think it's I don't know. It's more sort of organic from the music itself. It's
from playing at the piano. Do you play?
I think a lot of it absolutely grows out of playing at the piano. I compose at the piano, and I do quite enjoy the process of starting piece because it's the freest. It's the bit before you actually commit to any material, so you can just explore all sorts of different ideas at the piano. I mean, the hardest thing is making a real start, but
choosing the good ones.
Choosing but it's really fun just exploring ideas which
like a writer would, Emma, just stream of kind of let it flow and then allow the structure to take form.
Absolutely. I don't know how a writer would do it, but that may well be a similarity, and you may be affected by how you're feeling or something personal and private, but I wouldn't say it feeds directly into the music. Usually it's quite an abstract thing for me, even if the end result, I hope, is not abstract. I mean, I do love it actually when I set poems to music, because then you do have something tangible and something outside the music that can inspire you and can also give the people listening to the piece a bit of an idea of what you're thinking about.
Have you got a favourite piece that's come out of a poem that you'd like that we can listen to now?
Yeah, well, we could listen to a bit of this cello piece, cello and piano piece called Blue Shadows Fall, which is a very sort of evocative title from my libretto. My librettist, David Harsent, and I wrote an opera called In the Locked Room about 6 years ago, and there was some material from the opera that was kind of left over, and this one line suggested a kind of dark, nocturnal kind of piece that I was wanting to write anyway. It was a particularly beautiful... I'm not very good myself at coming up with beautiful titles, so I often like to steal a line of poetry or something like that, which I think, if you hear a little bit of it now...
What are your plans for the next couple of years, commission-wise, work-wise, aspirational-wise?
Well, just not to run out of ideas is the first thing, which is always a sort of fear in the back of your mind. But we've both got some lovely pieces to look forward to over the next few years. I'm writing another chamber piece for me to play, which is always a pleasure for a brilliant young violinist, Tamsin Whaley-Cohen, who I play with very regularly. We're doing a concert next year at the Wigmore Hall.
Yeah, well, we're lucky that we do have things in the diary for several years.
Yes, exactly, we are.
Can you conceive a piece for, say, a year? Does it take a year sometimes to go through that process and have the finished work?
It can do. I mean, I think it depends on the project. Obviously, if something is for orchestra and it's a longer work, it's probably going to take longer. Not always, but probably going to take longer than a small chamber work, for example, or a solo piece. But I mean, that does depend. Generally, I think, it's about leaving enough space and knowing how long it takes you to do things. And it does sometimes take me a little bit longer than it takes you, I think. We have different processes, and, that's one of the things I find a little frustrating, is Huw seems to be quicker than me, and that can be a little bit
bash it out.
No, but I think the grass is always greener somehow.
Yeah,
it's
you have your own challenges.
You're living with yourself, and you don't. Whenever I see whatever Helen's written at the end of a week or something, I don't see the effort and the struggle that she's been through. You just think, oh wow, she's done that. So it's hard for both of us in different ways to produce music, and of course, like anybody making any kind of art should be pretty self-critical and hard on yourself, because in the end, other people who aren't your friends or supporters are going to have to somehow enjoy this. Otherwise, well, for me, I don't think there's any point in doing it.
It's not always a straight line either, because sometimes you might mark out 7-8 months to write a big orchestral piece, concerto, whatever it is, and then some of it is going to come out in a steady stream, and other bits are going to take weeks of not really writing anything and having to scrap a whole load of stuff and go back to this point, and it's a messy process.
And can we expect a Grime Watkins co-written piece ever? Is that on the cards?
I think our aesthetics are a little bit too different, maybe.
Yeah, I think it would be hard. I mean, the closest to that is really me playing pieces of Helen's. Which is always a lovely thing to do, I must say.
It's so special.
That's the closest sort of collaboration we get. Yeah, I can't think of really. As
a language, that's so intense to know each other so well and be sort of effectively playing as a couple, playing the musical language of your partner. I mean, how close can you get in terms of each other's consciousness? And
although I know Helen's style very well, I certainly couldn't write pastiche Grime or anything like that.
Tell you what he can do, though, is he can, if he's sight reading it, he can pretty much get into the harmony and the language pretty quickly, even, if he doesn't know it well, and he can sort of play the right, wrong notes.
Play the Helen language.
The right, wrong notes.
Yes.
That's it.
They're the best wrong notes to play.
Well, thank you both very much for being with us today.
Pleasure.
And looking forward to hearing more of your works.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the first episode of the third series of Tessa Talks To Podcast, where we were discussing what music means to musical couple Helen Grime and Huw Watkins. Join me next month when I'll be talking to another very talented musical couple, and we'll be discussing what music means to them.